Welcome back, Whisky fans. Better late than never. Today I'm doing a video that I meant to do a long time ago, and it's something that's been doing the rounds on Whiskytube. It's a whiskey challenge, and it started off on Reddit and it jumped shipped to YouTube, where various YouTubers have had their take on it. And the challenge is called the You Only Need 5 Whiskies challenge, which, if you take a look at my whiskey collection, I'll tell you is an absolute lie. But that's what it's called, and I've been nominated by Jeff over at Whiskey. Seriously though, if any of you haven't had a look at Jeff's videos, if you haven't subscribed, go and take a look. He's got a great channel, great humour, great knowledge, and a very concise and entertaining style. So the categories, we've got 5 categories in this challenge, and you have to pick one whiskey for each. And the categories are an everyday sipper, an everyday go-to dram. Second category is impress your guests. Third is a cheap mixer. Then we've got a Friday night pour. And lastly, a dram for special occasions. So there's some tough choices in there. I think, as other people have said, this is a harder challenge than a lot of people give it credit for. I think, for one thing, when you've been around whiskey for a fair few years, you start to appreciate different things in different ways, and you appreciate things for what they are. And also, I think that a lot of the categories in this challenge are very open to interpretation. You can kind of pick your own dram that meets the criteria in ways that kind of make sense to you, which is kind of a good thing and kind of a pain in the arse. And I've also got the problem here that, being one of the last people on Whiskytube to do this, everyone else has already had a go, and I kind of don't want to pick the same drams that everyone else has. But I am going to have some honourable mentions to drams that other people have picked before I get around to my take on the category. I'm also going to expand my options a little bit by using whiskies that I either own or have owned in the past. So our first category is our everyday sipper, our go-to daily dram. So for this, I'm interpreting it as it needs to be cheap, not too challenging, but still decent. So my first honourable mention for this is going to be Shackleton Blended Malt, which is something that Jeff from Jeff Whiskey picked on his video for this challenge. If you're not subscribed to Jeff, go and have a look at his channel. It's a really unique and entertaining channel and well worth a sub. Along with Shackleton Blended Malt, and I think this is not a coincidence, I'm going to give another honourable mention to the Glenorchy 5-year-old Blended Malt from Lidl here in the UK, and probably a lot of Europe as well. And I think that's really not a coincidence that there's 2 blended malts there that I've given a mention to, because I think that blended malts as a category, they can offer really great value with some really great distillate-driven flavours that give you really good bang for buck. But my pick for the everyday sipper is going to be Black Bottle Andean and Oak. So this isn't a blended malt, but it is a blended scotch. And you can get it for about £25, which I think is amazing value. It's very cheap for what you get, in my opinion. You get a very, very decent ABV. It is young, but in my opinion, along with that youth, you get some lovely, punchy, bold flavours. This is a whiskey that I've reviewed recently, and it's one that I'll find myself keep going back to when I want something not too challenging, not too technical, and not too expensive. Just something to relax with and enjoy. Definitely ticks that box. So next category is a dram to impress your guests. And as Jeff at Whiskey has said, it really depends on what guests you've got and what they're going to be impressed by. So again, it's another category that's really open to interpretation. My first mention for this category is going to be something that I think is going to impress anyone, providing that they're not completely peat-averse. My first mention, Octomore. Now, I've had this one for quite a while, and I'm not going to get the bottle out because these tins are an absolute bastard to open, but Octomore is a whiskey that is almost engineered to impress. It's a whiskey that is designed to be talked about, to grab people's attention, and I'm sure with its superlative phenol count, it's a whiskey that you've all heard of, and you've probably either all made a special effort to try, or it's something that you want to try. This one here, it's been on my shelf for quite a while. It's release 6.1, so it's quite a few years old. And the phenol count on this one is 167 ppm. So you're looking at around about 4 times peatier than Ardbeg, at least on paper. I will get around to reviewing this one day, because I think that what you actually get in the glass is very different to what you get on paper, but it's still a fantastic, intriguing whisky which is bound to impress. My second pick for a whisky which will impress your guests is this guy. So this is another one that I've had for quite a while. This is Glenlivet 18. So you're all going to be familiar with Glenlivet, and probably a lot of you are going to be familiar with their 18-year-old expression. Until recently it was very available and very, very affordable. I paid about £50 for this, which I think a lot of us these days think is a very, very fair price for any 18-year-old whisky. You don't really get many 18-year-old whiskies for under £100 these days. And this stuff, the reason why I think this is a good whisky to impress your guests is because this is the old one where it was still bottled at 43%. And I think that because of that slightly higher ABV on this one compared to most Glenlivets that are coming in at 40%, this stuff is much better than you or your guests might expect from a bog standard mass-produced Glenlivet. I think that this stuff is really a masterclass in well-aged old malt, despite only being 43%. And I can't even begin to describe how sad I am that the new expressions of this are only 40% and twice the price. But this stuff at 43%, if you get the chance to get a hold of a bottle of this, it is wonderful, wonderful whisky. But that's enough honourable mentions. My pick for a dram to impress your guests is going to be something that I haven't actually got at the moment. It's something that I have had in the past, but it's a whisky which is hard to get and very, very expensive. My pick for a whisky to impress your guests is Ardbeg 17-year-old. And I'm not just picking this one because it's Ardbeg and it's 17 years old, although they obviously are things that impress a hell of a lot of people. The reason why I'm picking this one is because it's something that really surprised and impressed me, because this is a real time capsule dram. I think it will impress anyone who's not had it before, because it's really not what you might expect, especially if you have guests that haven't been drinking whiskey for a long time. They will be really surprised by this one, because I think it really highlights a lot of what's changed in the whiskey industry in the last 20 years, and a lot of the things that you used to get in older whiskey that we really don't see anymore, because this stuff is entirely different to modern Ardbeg. Even the 18, 20-something year releases, this stuff is an entirely different animal again. I think with Ardbeg 17, you get a much more gentle, refined and mature style of whisky. The peat takes much more of a back seat. It's much less raw, much more complex and complete. Again, despite that lowish ABV, it really is a blast from the past and shows how things have changed. And I think it's another one that is just bound to impress. Moving on, our next category is a cheap mixer. And I think that it's really funny that when you watch Whiskytubers videos on this challenge, when they get to the cheap mixer category, they all give you the same disclaimer at the start of this category, and that's that I'm going to pick this for a mixer, but I don't drink mixed drinks. Well, neither do I really, but I think that when you're talking about something that you're going to put into a mixer, again, I think it needs to be something affordable and available. And my preference is, when I'm putting something in a mixer, is I want something with a higher ABV so I can mix it and not have it get lost in whatever you're mixing it with. And for that reason, I'm going to give an honourable mention to something that Jeff at G Whisky picked, and that's Wild Turkey 101. Wild Turkey 101 has been my favourite for a long time. I bought a lot of bottles of the old Wild Turkey 101 8-year-old back when it had an age statement, and that was one of the best bourbons I've ever had. For a straightforward, stereotypical bourbon, it's really up there, one of the best quality bourbons I've tried. And even now, the modern stuff that hasn't got the age statement, it's only lagging slightly behind the old 8-year-old age statement. It's very, very good stuff for a very low price. And I know mixed drinks aren't trendy, especially with us whiskey geeks here on Whiskytube, but if you are looking for something a bit different, try chocolate milk and Wild Turkey 101 mixed 50-50. It works very, very well. My next mention for a cheap mixer is going to be something a little bit more a little bit more expected, the kind of thing that a lot of people drinking mixed drinks are probably already using, and that's Grant's. So Grant's is probably better known to the kind of people watching these videos as the company that owns Glenfiddich and Balvenie and all of that group of distilleries, that Speyside group. But before there was Glenfiddich or any of those single malts, before any single malts at all really existed, people all over the world were buying Grant's blended Scotch. It's a company, it's a brand that has an enormous, prestigious heritage, and it's something that you can still buy today for very little money. I think that this stuff really fits the bill for the cheap mixer. It's decent enough, it's cheap enough, it has enough flavour not to be pushed around by whatever you add to it, and I think that this stuff is one of the best things that you can use to make a whiskey mac. But for my pick for something to use as a cheap mixer, I'm going to go a little bit more left field, a little bit more unpredictable. My pick for a cheap mixer is something different entirely. And I like to think that if you only need 5 whiskies, if one of your whiskies isn't a whiskey, that means you can have 6, doesn't it? This is Ray and Nephew Jamaican White Rum, Jamaican White Overproof Rum. This is something that I think a lot of you guys in the UK are going to be surprised that this stuff has been available in the supermarkets, really cheap, for a really long time. I personally have only tried this stuff pretty recently, and I really like it, but I had never seen this stuff, even though I'm a bit of a regular checking the spirit section in the supermarkets. It sells for about £25 to £30 depending on where you buy it, so I think that it fits in well with that cheap requirement. Obviously this is very, very different to whiskey, and I think that it mixes differently to whiskey too, so you need to do a little bit of experimentation to figure out what you're doing there. But I think that this stuff, with the ABV of 63%, it's a very good one for a mixer. And I think that it can stand up to being mixed with just about anything that you might care to mix with it. But it's not just a great mixer. This stuff is also great on its own, even at full strength. We will be seeing this on the channel very soon. Oh, beautiful. So next category is our Friday night pour. So this is another one that's really open to interpretation. It depends on what you like doing on a Friday afternoon, Friday night, and the kind of whiskey that you want to accompany you. Me personally, I work weekdays, so on my Friday nights I want a whiskey that I want something that I can unwind with, but I want something that's decent enough as well. It's not usually going to be something too fancy or expensive, because after a week at work I'm not generally going to be in the mood for anything too complicated, but after work on Friday it does need to be good. So my first mention for a Friday night pour is going to be this stuff. Good old Lachig from Distel, 46.3%, sells for about £33, and you get a heavily peated whiskey that's been matured in bourbon casks and finished in those Spanish Rioja casks. So this has Friday night written all over it for me. It's cheap, it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's a little bit experimental. It's a great whiskey to really unwind with and enjoy. But I was going to have this as my pick for my Friday night pour, but I'm actually going to make a last minute amendment here, and I'm going to go with something else. But it's something else that fits in that same category as being smoky, indulgent, punchy, and just fun. And that's this one. It's the Kilchoman Maccabee. So I have reviewed this on my channel very recently, and this is the cask strength version, but honestly the non-cask strength version, which is probably, it's only slightly cheaper because they've priced this stuff very fairly, but I think that the non-cask strength 46% version is almost as good, and for a Friday night pour I think it really can't be beat. I think that this stuff, like the Lachig Rioja, It's sweet and smoky and fun and punchy. This stuff has probably got more complexity than the Lechig Rioja, but you can still enjoy it for what it is. It's just a whiskey that you can really enjoy and unwind with and really sink into. So that takes us to our final category, and that's going to be the special occasion dram. So that's one where I really feel that I need to drop my criteria that a whiskey has to be good value for money. It's one where I sort of relax that a little bit and go for just a whiskey which is as special and good as it can possibly be. And my first honourable mention for the special occasion whiskey is going to be this one. And you know it's special because it comes in a wooden box. And only very special things come in dead trees, right? I think that's how it works. So this here is a whiskey that I've been saving for quite a while, possibly for a special occasion, possibly just for when I want it. But this is an 18-year-old Lechig. It's actually the batch number 3. I've had this for quite a few years, and look at that. You don't get much more special than its own little crate. It even has little foam bits to hold it in. Oh, I should be wearing the special protective gloves handling this one, I think. I don't know how available this stuff is these days, but I didn't pay too much for this. It's well under £100, I think. I expect that's gone up a little bit, but probably not too much. But Lechig is now a whiskey that I think just about everyone is aware of and everyone loves. And I think that Lechig is also a great distillery because there's some heavily peated distilleries where the enjoyment is really to be had at the lower end of the range, sort of in the 10 to 15-year-old bracket. In particular, I'm thinking about things like Laphroaig, where I think that the 10-year-old cask strength release absolutely trounces everything else that they make, really. If you're looking at like a 25-year-old Laphroaig, it's a very, very expensive dram, but I wouldn't really say that I enjoy it any more than a good batch of the 10 cask strength. But with Lechig, I think that you do get something extra. This is lovely, lovely whiskey. It is obviously 18 years old, made on the Isle of Mull. It comes in at 46.3% ABV. It is unchill filtered. Because this one is old, it probably does have a little bit of colouring in it, but probably not too much. And this one, kind of similar to the Lechig Rioja, this one is actually a finish as well. It is finished in Spanish sherry wood, but I don't hold it against it with this one. It is phenomenal whiskey. So let's get rid of that one. Get rid of the whiskey coffin. I've got one more honourable mention for a special occasion dram, and that's going to be this one. And kind of shows my bias a little bit that this is another peated 18-year-old whiskey, and I think that probably does say quite a lot about my preferences, that not all but well-aged peated whiskey is kind of my happy place. So this is one that the flippers would like to get their hands on. This is a Springbank product. This is a Long Row 18, and again I have had this one for quite a while. It's been on my shelf for quite a few years because you can't bloody get it at any price these days. Well, that's not true. If you pay about 5 times retail price, you'd probably get it from a flipper somewhere. But I think this is, if you can get it, it's another really great 18-year-old whiskey that shows that peated whiskey can be great at an older age, leaning into that more complex and gentle side of peat. But moving on to my actual pick for my special occasion whiskey, I'm going to go for something that I have actually opened. I feel like that's quite appropriate, and it's something that I bought a few months ago. It's something that I reviewed, and it's something that I keep nipping back to whenever I want something that little bit special. And you're definitely going to see a pattern here. So this is peated Bunnahabhain. It's my Bunnahabhain Munya, and it's the 2004 Munya Pedro Jimenez cask finish. So this is heavily peated Bunnahabhain. I believe this is another 18-year-old, 17 or 18 years old, and it's peated Bunnahabhain finished in a PX sherry cask. As I said, it's another kind of 18-year-old-ish heavily peated whiskey, and I do think that you really want some peat in a celebratory dram. And of course this obviously has loads of that heavily sherried, sweet PX influence that a lot of Bunnahabhain has. And I think that this is probably the most special whiskey that I have open right now. So all that's left for me to do now is nominate some other people to do this challenge. Love that stuff. So my nominations are going to be Sour Leg Whiskey Review, and I'm also going to nominate Gert at Whiskey Lovers Society. Now I don't think either of you have done this challenge before, but apologies if you have. I look forward to seeing your take on this and seeing what you guys pick. Before I go, I just want to give a quick congratulatory shout with my celebratory dram here, apparently, to Sour Leg Whiskey Review for recently passing their 1k milestone. I'm going to put links to all of these channels in the description below so you can go and have a look at their videos and subscribe. So that's Sour Leg Whiskey Review. Another massive congratulations going out to Gert at Whiskey Lovers Society. He's recently had his 1k too. And last but not least, massive congratulations to John at Just Whiskey, who's also had his 1k. So thanks for joining me on this one, and if you have your own Whiskytube channel, then by all means have a go at this challenge, because I think it does teach you a little bit about what you prefer, and it kind of gets you thinking about why you like the different whiskies that you like and what you like about them. And if you don't have your own channel, then let me know what your 5 picks are in the comments below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and cheers.